seemed like it hit you pretty quick that you wanted to do that, because I know we talked about a bunch of other topics, but then this one seemed like it not came out of nowhere, but not any of the ones we talked about. So what
Right.
made it
Right.
what made it come up? Well, the topic: exercise, training, and what was the other thing? Working out.
Working out. Yeah. So the thing
Yeah.
that made it a priority was a personal experience that it actually happened to me today, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
So I was at the gym, and I was actually coaching. I was on the floor coaching, and it was at UA.
Okay.
So I was the floor coach today, and it was a slow part of the afternoon. So my thought was, hey, let me get my workout in. And it had been kind of like an off day for me. Like I wasn't really feeling very motivated, but I saw the opportunity, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna get in some training. So
Sure.
the interesting thing was, and it kind of just came to me all of a sudden, and let's go back to several months ago, where you were helping me start building programs, right? So, and that was before your book came out and all of that. So
Sure.
I was still building off of that premise that everything that you and I had talked about as far as building a program. And basically I was under the premise that I was training, that I was in a strict training environment, because I was building my program based on our conversations,
Right.
So and what I realized today was that I was not training. I was still working out.
Oh, what makes you say that? What was the epiphany?
And I don't know if we want to jump in right there, or do we want to use that as a premise?
Okay, yeah, build the anticipation, man.
Okay, so that's the premise. The premise is.
Sorry, I'm you know me, I'm always a gunslinger, man. I just want to shoot and bust down doors and all that. So
right. So that's the premise. Today I realized that although I had the tool in my hand to build a proper training program for myself, with those tools, I was still working out.
Okay.
With the training. So
the link there's still a disconnect.
Right. And that's where I would like to defer to you, so we can kind of lay some ground as far as where do you come from when you hear those terms. I'll describe where I come from when I hear those terms, and that'll help us kind of swing back around to my epiphany today.
Sure.
So when we talk about, and this is, you can take it whatever direction you want to. We have three terms. We have training, we have exercise, and we have working out. So if you want to touch on all three, or if you just want to jump in training versus exercise, just like, when you hear those terms, what comes to mind to you?
Sure. So training and exercise both have similarities in the aspect that they both have purpose, right? Somebody is exercising because they want to be healthy, let's say, right? They're exercising, even if they're just checking the block, even if it's disorganized, that they do have purpose, because, right, there's a fundamental reason why they are sweating, right? In their mind, however elementary that is, there's purpose. Training has purpose as well, but training is taking that purpose and giving it direction. There's defined goals. There is specific micro goals per day. And then on top of the micro goals and on top of the direction, there is a broad painted picture of not necessarily an endpoint, but pit stops, I guess you could say, to building yourself upwards. So exercise is purpose, training is purpose and direction, with a broad scope understanding and micro goals. And I guess that's kind of straightforward right there, in terms of differences from a behavior standpoint. Yeah.
So for you, the main difference between the two is
direction.
Is the direction. Okay.
Yeah, that would be if I had to give you a straightforward answer. Exercise and training is differentiated by the fact that there is direction.
Okay.
There's a target that we're shooting for.
Okay. Okay. If I had to give my just not something that I've sat and pondered over, but just like my gut reaction of the difference between the two, it would be very similar. But for me, since this is fresh in my mind, coming off of my goal setting workshop, to describe to a person what is a purposeful goal and what is just a statement or a wish statement or a dream statement, there are some similarities between the two, but then there are some very stark differences between the two as well. And where you use the term direction, I use a very similar term, but slightly different. I say the difference to me is what I would call intentionality. Training has, where you said direction, and it's we're going down the same road. It's just my term is slightly different. That sure. I have an intentionality component to my training, and to me that's what was slightly missing from my program. So even before we jump back into that, let's rewind back to our original conversation about building training programs and everything. And one of the things I remember was you gave me some documents, and it talked about like the first 4 week of a new training program. That's what I really adopted. I was trying to establish my numbers. So every day I went as hard as I could. I was really trying to get good numbers for that 4 week period, so that my second 4 weeks I could scale them back, and that's where I would enter into the training zone. Mm-hmm. So what happened to me is I got stuck in that first 4 weeks. So I dragged that out for 6 or 8 weeks or whatever. So I'm every day I'm going as hard as I possibly can, and I never got to the place where I had that intentionality built into it. Like, okay, these are going to be the numbers I'm going for, and once I hit those numbers, I may hit them and knock them out the park, or I may feel like crap and just barely make it. But I have numbers that I'm going for every workout. I have an intent going in of every workout, and I never really, the whole thing never really came together. Mm-hmm. I was still going as hard as I can, trying to push the numbers as hard as I could, And another thing is I never got to where I really would design my workout beforehand, like a month out or anything like that. So many days I had kind of a template that I was going off of, and I was still more or less getting to the gym and like, okay, this is what I need to do / what do I feel like doing? And that to me that's the opposite of intentionality.
Yeah, that's a dangerous, slippery slope. That's right. A slippery slope to demotivation for me.
Right. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what I realized today. I still didn't have those hard numbers to go off of, but I had my training journal from before. So I looked at it. I said, okay, these are the numbers I'm going for today. Once I hit those numbers, I will say that today was a good training day. Mm-hmm. So even though I still didn't have my spreadsheet or anything, but before I worked out, I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew exactly what numbers I was going for on each of my lifts, and I executed that workout. It didn't kill me. I didn't feel smoked. Right. I felt like I had done a complete workout. I felt good about it. I hit the numbers that I was supposed to hit, and that was it.
Not bored, not exhausted, accomplished.
Exactly. And to me, that's where the light bulb came on and said, okay, this was a real training session. This wasn't a This wasn't a workout. I wasn't, and I was in the gym by myself. So that was important to me because
That's when you know it's genuine.
right, right. There was nobody there. I wasn't showing off. I wasn't trying to, hey, look what I can do. I'm not comparing myself to anybody else. I'm not looking at the guy on the squat rack next to me and I'm looking at his numbers and I'm like, okay, he's looking over here. I want him to be envious or I'm envious of him. You know, there was no interplay of anything. I was in the gym by myself. I had those numbers that I was going for. I hit all my lifts. And that was it. You know, even at the end of the workout, after I hit my primary lifts, I even said, okay, I'm feeling good. Let me go ahead and smoke myself a little bit.
Sure.
So, you know, so I went some low volume stuff. I did like a dumbbell complex. I threw in some jump ropes. I did a couple pull-ups, but that's where it was like, okay, this is just volume. I'm feeling good, and I want to go ahead and really, you know, feel like I'm exhausting myself to some extent. You know, the last 10 or 15 minutes of the workout, I really tried to smoke myself, so to speak. But that was intentional also.
Right.
You know, it wasn't like, okay, I'm feeling good, so I'm gonna do 10 sets of bench press today, or I'm feeling good, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna stay on this squat rack for an hour. And that was another difference, that I had the clock running, so I was able to see my rest intervals. I was able to see how much time I was spending, on each exercise. So today was just intentional. That's the best word that I can use to describe it. That I had an intent going in, I followed the program, and even at the end of the workout where I said, okay, I'm feeling good, let me just go ahead and burn it up a little bit. Let me go ahead and do a little extra. I was still able to do that. And, and even right now, I still feel good. It's not like I'm totally trashed and I killed myself today, so now I'm not gonna feel like working out tomorrow. It's like
there's balance.
Right. So
yeah, I think you make a really good point. That's where even when we are training, I think the first fault that happens once people get into training is they lose the intentionality, whether that's from boredom or whether that's from burnout. This isn't just a beginner's issue. This is a constant struggle with everyone, is maintaining intentionality. That's usually, I wouldn't say a problem, because it's not a problem, right? It's real life. It's not something wrong with you, but I deal with it a lot in programming for clients. We got to make sure that we're keeping intentionality, and if there is burnout, what's going on. I'm currently, like, I'm glad you used that word, because I needed to describe what's going on, and I'm getting close to this meet, and I'm getting ready to peak for it, and I'm burning out, right? There's a lot of accumulated physical fatigue. There's a lot of accumulated volume. I'm 3 weeks out from the meet, but I need to maintain intentionality from the mental side. Like, yeah, I'm beat up. I can handle being beat up, but bench pressing 4 days a week for the last 6 months, regardless of even if it was easy, just mentally bench pressing 4 times a week for 6 months takes us to, Monday bench press, Tuesday pause bench press, Thursday dumbbell bench press, Friday incline bench press, whatever. That takes a huge toll, and I just thought about it this week as I'm starting to get into that grind phase. This is the make or break for beginners in terms of their first hiccup in training, and this is also the make or break for people that want to perform well at a meet. You're pushing the limits of your body right before you back off and try to heal up, and you don't want to waste valuable training by losing your intentionality. And I say that because specifically yesterday, no reason, except the issues we're talking about, I lost intentionality, and I pretty much said F it. Like, I bench pressed 4 days a week for the last 6 months. I'm not doing my last set of bench press. and I just didn't do it. I lost intentionality. Did I deviate from the program? No, I just didn't complete the program. And it was strictly 100% intentionality. I wasn't gassed out. I wasn't burned out. I wasn't grinding. I was just, if I did another repetition on the God blessed bench press, I'm going to throw up, and it's good because we had some of the similar training today at work. As educators at work, we pour out a lot to clients, and so every once in a while we take the time to reel it back in and pour out to each other and kind of like coach each other, and it's funny how this is all coming full circle. It's definitely what I needed today was the talk at work, and then hearing your words of intentionality and getting when you can rationalize and process what's going on, it rejuvenates and refreshes you. But definitely had a moment of weakness the past week or two with, I'm sure physical fatigue didn't help my mental filter and strength at all, but it's good that I'm hearing intentionality. I need to not burn out this close to the meet, because this is the make or break. This is when you grind through and then heal up and shine, or you just say F it and forget your intentionality and then choke. So that's a really good point that's extremely applicable from beginner to advanced. So
right, and also something that a lot of us overlook, myself included, is when we talk about that concept of intentionality, to throw it back to one of our earlier conversations about stress recovery intervals. That's something that we all are guilty of, is not being as intentional about our recovery as we are about our stress. This is I use the word stress in a relative manner this time, meaning the accumulated fatigue that you put in by sticking to your workout plan is a stressor. It's a stressor to you physically. It's right. A stressor to you mentally. So we would generally consider that a good stressor because it's something that has a benefit to you, and because you have some relative degree of control over it. So that we would separate that from like the negative stress that you may get from work, so to speak. But it is still a stressor, to where we have to be as intentional about our recovery process. And the better we are at that, the better we are at avoiding that burnout feeling, especially the mental burnout, because our minds will burn out much quicker, and it's much more detrimental when we experience that mental burnout than when our body breaks down.
100%, and that needs to be said again, because people, I think they hear it, and I think it's been cliched too much, but it's science, it's truth. So many people, and especially coaches these days, there's a lot of excuses out there for things, and I'm telling you, you're not overtrained. You have 99% of people out there exercising have not experienced overtraining. They've experienced a loss of intentionality, and the cliche of the mind gives out before the body is legitimately true. And I get where it's coming from. There's always a polarization. You got these people that just trash their bodies, and then the response is like, hey, you need to rest and heal up. But then that understanding gets shotgun blasted to everyone else. 99% of people have never experienced a training program, a grind through, that hard intentionality. I mean, you're not undertrained you're not overtrained. If anything, you are undertrained, and you need to refresh in your mind and start putting in more work. Right? There's rarely anyone who's truly overtrained. So right. you can't say that enough. The mind 100% gives out before the body does.
And this is something I wasn't necessarily going to include in this discussion, but it does kind of fit a little bit. And that is, if we can segue into a short discussion on what we call willpower. Like,
sure, man. This is the internet. We can do what we want.
so when we start talking about willpower, and it's most fitting when we talk about willpower in terms of nutrition. So let's touch on that real quick, and then I'll swing back around to how I think willpower plays into our physical training as well. So the thing about willpower, and I've learned to contrast willpower with good sound habit or developing habit versus willpower. So the thing is, willpower takes energy. It takes energy to drive our willpower. So to me, it doesn't reason that I would use a source of motivation that requires energy in order to restrict my intake of energy, i.e., I use my iron will in order to restrict my desire to eat foods that I'm not supposed to eat. So it's like I'm using willpower, especially if my nutrition plan isn't intentional. So now I'm thinking that I can live off of, salads and low calorie things, or low carb is very popular nowadays. So I think I can deplete my brain of glucose, i.e. the carbs, and I'm going to use my willpower in order to drive that engine. Well, what's feeding my willpower?
Right, there is a physical component to
right.
to a lot of the spiritual and mental stuff. Right. It's obviously it's fluid, it's back and forth, but yeah, absolutely, it's counterintuitive.
Extremely counterintuitive. So my brain runs off of glucose. I'm depriving my body of glucose, and I'm trying to use my willpower in order to drive that machine. Doesn't make sense. Not when it's laid out like that. Right. So that same vehicle can be used to describe our training, as in, let's say you try to stick to a strict regimen. And this is where I would say discipline is separate from strict willpower. Because if I conduct myself with intentionality, if I conduct myself with discipline, then I build in those micro habits, those micro goals, so that eventually I don't have to rely on that discipline to drive the engine anymore. Those habits just become part of the routine.
Right.
Whereas willpower always requires energy to drive that machine, so I'm always having to feed the willpower. So if I use just iron will, grit, determination to get up out of bed and to go work out every morning, what's going to happen when that willpower is not fed? What happens when it's not there anymore? I don't have good solid habits to rely on. So as I start to experience that mental decline, which is running the willpower, which is the only thing that I have to motivate me. What happens when I look at willpower like it's a debit card. Eventually, there's no more money in the account. You can't swipe it anymore. So now, where are you gonna get the motivation when you're all out of money on your debit card? Where's it gonna come from? That's where disciplined habits, training protocols, that's where these things start to come into play. Looking at my workout today, and we all have low motivation days, but if I can look at that workout and say, okay, these are the numbers I'm going for, these are the exercises, I know what I'm in store for. I know exactly what I have to do. I can motivate myself to, okay, let me get just this next set of bench press done. Okay, let me get the next set done. I can kind of talk my way through that, but if I go to the gym like, okay, I'm working out and I'm gonna burn myself out and I'm gonna get the best workout ever with no intentionality. I don't know what I'm working on. I don't know what numbers I'm looking for. I'm just gonna throw weight on the bar and just lift it, in some kind of random fashion. I'm not writing down my numbers or anything. It's hard to motivate yourself for that day after day,
Yeah.
And once that motivation runs out, it's like, well, now what's driving the machine? Now that lack of intentionality means now I stop working out altogether.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing with, 90% of the population. Like everyone knows that 90% of the population doesn't work out, but what people forget is that 90% of the population has worked out before.
Right.
They just, they fell off, and that fall off, people get hyped up, they get motivated by something, and it's the same thing with, nutrition plans and things like that. Everyone jumps on the hype of the nutrition plan that's got the coolest swag behind it, but it works initially, and then they fall off. It always comes back to we're not looking for the quick fix, we're looking for the lifestyle. And if you don't keep the intentionality, willpower and motivation is good at first because that's what you need to start etching in the solid route and the path. But
Right.
You need to start working discipline immediately because as your bottle rocket runs out, you need to make sure that those train tracks are laid down so that you just keep on rolling. So.
Right. Right. And I think people, especially less experienced people, they need that program, or they need it outlined to them just like that. Like, hey, right now you're running off of pure willpower and motivation that will decline at some point, and we have to have established some degree of habit by the time that initial energy wears off. And it's the same thing. I always fall back on the example of, in January, all the gyms in the country are flooded with people who have set New Year's resolutions, and by February the gym is back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because everyone is motivated to start the year off strong. They're motivated to reach these new goals, and it is just that pure energy and desire and motivation that gets them to go sign up for the gym, to go sign that membership. But once that wears off, that's it. And we all know some gyms who sell these super cheap memberships. That's what they're banking off of.
Right, right, yeah.
They make their quota, probably 2 months out the year. I would guess, January and May or something like that.
Yeah.
That's where they make their budget for the whole year, basically.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. And again, it's not just beginners. There's as we train on and drive on. I mean, people find it hard to I don't even want to say believe. I guess I do want to say believe, but they find it hard to believe, but mostly because they can't conceptualize it when I tell them for the last 12 years of my life I've been lifting. And they're like, when they hear that, they're like, okay, yeah. And then I stop and I'm like, no, you don't understand. The last 12 years of my life, I have missed a total of, a 2-week span when I was stuck on some military duty, and then a 1-month span when I had a injury. And they still don't conceptualize what I'm saying, right? They hear that when you tell people, oh, you've worked out for 10 years, they just, because they've never experienced, they don't truly know what you're saying. They think just, oh, you work out a couple weeks, you take some time off, you work out here, you take some time off. Like they don't actually understand what I'm saying. When I say I've been training and working out for the last 12 years of my life, it's the literal equivalent of saying I've been eating food for the last 12 years of my life. You don't take that off. And,
Right.
and I think that's where people have a hard time conceptualizing that, but then also because they can't conceptualize it, when they do first fully intake what I'm telling them, they think it's, he's just a fitness freak and all this stuff. And it's like, look, I have a completely normal life. It doesn't consume my life. Absolutely, there are times when it does consume my life because it's what I'm interested in, but to have the status that I have and that many other people have, like you said, when it's a lifestyle, and the motivation's gone and the railroad tracks are laid, it's not really that surprising that I can say for 12 years I've lifted with